It's terrific to have you. I'd love to find out, and I looked at everybody's talking points here, about how fast the disruption's happening, where technology supports oil and gas, but also supports what Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber was saying in his opening remarks, a realistic transition. So we often talk about the energy trilemma, and I was involved with the World Energy Council, which in London has worked very diligently in that space. So energy security has gone up in terms of priorities, obviously, because we had the shock value. Affordability went out the door if you're a European citizen and living in London these days. And then sustainability. And how do we bring those together in a very pervasive way? I think it'd be a good place to start. Sophia, I'd like, having mentioned Dr. Sultan and the transformation taking place at Adnoc, you said it's a wide berth because there's so many projects on the ground. And we've heard from Arvind and Peng, and I'd love to get an update on where they think we're going here. But a wide berth, but you can see where the difference of technology is making at this stage in the transition, in particular in efficiencies?
Absolutely. So Adnoc's a really interesting company because there's 50,000 people working in Adnoc across a very, very wide value chain. So Adnoc has a lot of data. We have a lot of data that's built up in all of our businesses. But as we look at how we progress moving forward, harnessing the value of that data is really important. So we can see that artificial intelligence is being leveraged across our business. We have a couple different data centers that people have maybe heard about. One of them is the Panorama Data Center, which is where all of our business intelligence comes together. So multiple different operating companies, all of their data is coming into one place, and we're able to make decisions that are better for Adnoc, that create efficiencies, that help us manage our energy usage, that help us manage all the different levers that we're measuring today. So when we invest in trying to gain insights from the data, we can actually make better decisions. So Panorama is one area which is interesting, but we also have loads of subsurface data. We have been drilling wells, we've been acquiring seismic through reservoirs, cores, all sorts of different pieces that have traditionally been quite siloed when you looked at how we've worked with that data. So as we bring it together, we can make better decisions. And both Panorama and the Thamama Subsurface Center, I think, have generated over $1 billion of value each for the company in the last 5 years. Now the key is, let's take all of this and leverage it again for the next step, because... I'm,
as you know, teaching a course at NYU in Abu Dhabi about the UAE as a global emerging market hub for energy, trade, and finance, and we came to Adnoc, to the panorama room, and then went to the 3D well sites and subsurface, as you said. And it's extraordinary to think, because it's, you know, it looks like science fiction, but it's reality today. But it's harnessing the data. And Arvind, you presented an interesting survey. You said recently that everybody in this community wants to see a transition, but in reality, about 1 out of 4 companies are actually doing something about it. So how does IBM and G42 fit into that equation? Do you want to start?
Sure. Let me start on that, but also go back to a point, John, you made right at the beginning. I think the last 9 months now has shown us that energy security is perhaps more important than anybody ever thought it was. And certain countries have realized that you need to have a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan. And I think that's a really important consideration to take into account. We heard the prior speaker talk about over 80% is still based on hydrocarbons, and that's just a reaction. But speaking as a technologist, less as in the oil and gas industry, quality of life and energy consumption has been 1:1 for thousands of years. And so that is why energy security is important. Now, we have to make that transition, to your point of 1 in 4. But there is often opportunity in crisis. With the energy prices that are going on now around the globe, there is a lot more focus on the E side, as in, can we use energy more efficiently? Do we have to, can we cut down on wasteful usage? And on the data point, and I strongly agree with Sophie, these things are all driven by collecting data from disparate sources, putting it together, coming up with models. we believe that for many, many enterprises, about 30% of the energy could potentially be saved. And that's a big, big step on the way towards the medium step, which would be some of the transitions. Now, is it going to be renewables? Is it going to be nuclear? People who are different than us, maybe people like Sophie will decide that, not people like us. But I think it has to be probably all of those towards a future which is correct. I hope it's closer in.
Consumption, Arvind, or is it
I believe that energy usage is going
30% consumption, or even in the fields?
I think that we are going to reduce consumption by 30% if we can use data really effectively. But in this same period, the demand will probably increase by more than 30%. So we also have to do that, as opposed to only demand increasing and no decrease in or no increase in efficiency. We can get both going. So that is a big help when you put those two together. And then find which are the transition, which I think has to be more than just the renewables. I call nuclear renewable. I guess not everybody will, but maybe they'll forgive me for calling it that. And then we have to add others into the mix as we go along.
Well, this last generation of nuclear technology is far different than the ones that were involved in Fukushima or in Chernobyl before it, right? And that's often, I find in the energy conversation, by the way, it's either like it's black or white, and we've lost the shades of gray, which doesn't help.
Well, I was going to say, well, we all
but
talk
coal
about,
is okay for Germany, but not nuclear. It's just kind of a different thing.
well, hydrogen was the Zeppelin, but hopefully we've forgotten that after 100 years.
Yeah, I know, unfortunately. Peng, AI as a great unifier, the democratization of AI is something you wanted to address. We had two Africans on our panel in this very room earlier. They were saying we need to get energy to the market. How does AI help them not only get energy, but to actually do it as efficiently as possible if they're going to be more reliant on oil and gas as they try to develop and move away from, as you know, wood burning in the homes, which is still extraordinary in the 21st century?
First, John, glad your voice is back.
Thanks. Yeah, so am I.
And
it's hard to be in broadcasting or moderating
without your voice.
Have a voice.
That's your weapon. And also good to be here with my colleague Sophie and also good friend Arvind. I think I can give you two examples probably of how AI is really already becoming a reality in this ecosystem of Adnoc and Abu Dhabi and UAE in general. As you may know, past 2 days, a lot of noises about this wonderful IPO we just put in market, Bayanat company. Bayanat is a company inside G42 focused on doing survey work for all of UAE different entities and commercial companies. In fact, a key customer of Bayanat is Adnoc. We've been doing land and sea survey for Adnoc for over a decade. What we did with Bayanat recently, over the past couple of years, was to apply advanced computer vision technology, which is division of AI, to do much more comprehensive, precision, and effective surveying. Not only the cost has gone down, the speed went up, but also the results are much more useful for Adnoc. And the market recognized this. This is why Bayanat became a very successful IPO when we launched it in this market just a couple of days ago. In fact, Bloomberg says it's the most successful IPO of the year globally. Bayanat is an AI company, and this market has recognized its value. It has delivered value to our economy here. This is a great example, I think.
That's so entirely G42 company?
It's majority owned by G42.
Good, and you have partners here locally or internationally?
Internationally, including Silver Lake in California, is a backer of Bayanat as well.
Very interesting. What sort of difference is it making when it comes to oil and gas and collaboration with Sophie, for example, Peng?
Well, Sophie is a key customer of ours, in addition to being a partner.
I was wondering why in the green room you were so friendly to her. Now
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, this business requires us to know a lot more about the earth we live in. And we still know so little about it. Most of what you know comes from surveying the land and understanding the sea. Even though we sent probe to Mars already, we still are exploring this place we call home. So Bayanat is a leading example of applying artificial intelligence to build a map, a much more precise and real-time map of where we live and how to better explore it and how to better take advantage of it and preserve it. So this is where Bayanat is adding value to Adnoc and to our society.
Very interesting. So if you said something in the green room which stuck in my mind is that there was almost fear of technology prior to the pandemic. So as painful as the pandemic was, I'm sure IBM would say the same, but we learned how to embrace technology if you didn't before. The last 18 months at CNN, I broadcasted from my apartment, right? So as a one-man band, so you can do things and teach an old horse new tricks. But how does it apply to oil and gas? I know Dr. Sultan was consolidating 16 brands, and the panoramic room was, in a sense, to bring them under one umbrella with the name, but they could see line of sight to productivity and problems and solutions, right? How is it working in terms of accepting, getting over the fear factor of technology in that space?
I think the fear factor is really interesting because the jobs actually change over time. And the best example I can give for this is when we talk about drilling wells. So automation around drilling wells is really important. AI around drilling wells is so incredibly important because there's so much data that's happening. But when you think about just put a picture in your head of who is a driller, who's a long-time, 30-year experienced driller. They've built up their knowledge and their competence over time. Each one of the drillers that I've met that really embraces automation and AI has had an experience with it while they were drilling a well where machine learning picked up something that they realize, my goodness, I couldn't have realized that with what was going on. There was so much data coming at me. The machine recognized this and helped me take corrective action that has improved efficiency, that has allowed us to deliver a better well, a more efficient well, greater reservoir contact. The list goes on and on and on. But what we're talking about is still trust in technology. Trust in technology is a big part to how we can leverage it into our businesses. So we need to think about the use cases that we all work together on. So as we try and collaborate, it's really important that we think, where's the use case? What's the problem I'm trying to solve for here? And how do I then build the technology and build that pilot so that it can be scaled out? Because you need success on the pilot in order to scale, but it's that trust in the technology that's the thing that I think really holds us back. So when you look at the pandemic, step back from it, how painful it has been, but we've had a different relationship with technology in a number of different areas that's been positive.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns in the UK about data collection for health, and I think the pandemic changed that. And your data sets, I think, Arvind, you'd say the same. I don't know if you and Peng want to address it, but you learn a lot from the data sets in healthcare.
Look, without the data sets in healthcare, the efficacy of the vaccines, as well as all of the prevention mechanisms that were put in place could not have happened. We know this much. I mean, the way that the vaccine companies, the mRNA vaccines in particular, were able to get to market so quickly, they could look at the genomic sequence of the virus. They could very quickly engineer a mRNA vaccine against that genomic sequence. And actually, as the variants have come, now there is the bivalent vaccines that are out there. What took 9 months this time actually took less than 6 weeks for the computational piece. That is the data and the analytics and the AI to work. And then the remaining 6 months was making sure they're safe in a human being. 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Prior generations of these techniques took 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
I'd say that's 2 orders of magnitude improvement. That's remarkable. And as a consequence, while the diseases have not gone away, their severity has dramatically decreased because of the number of people in the world who have been vaccinated. And epidemiologists would tell us that as that number keeps increasing, actually we are going to get a lot more control over this. So I think 2 orders of magnitude on a methodology which hadn't been changed in the prior 100 years roughly, it's remarkable, isn't it, for using data and AI?
No, absolutely.
If I may add to this, John, just briefly, you know very well, UAE led a multi-center global trial of the vaccine from Sinopharm. We did the enrollment of 47,000 people, from having 0 trial in the past in this region to building one of the largest trials in the world. This was 2 years ago.
How long did it take, if you can just give the audience a sense of, to get that trial from start to a database that was reliable?
How long they took?
Yeah.
3 months.
Wow.
It's a record, less than 100 days we did this. Obviously, it was imperative to do so, but also because we were ready digitally. The database was there, cloud technology was there, we could collaborate around the world with partners. But I want to say beyond the PCR testing, vaccine formulation, we begin to build relationship digitally between us and our environment as well. Going beyond testing our own biology, we begin to test wastewater, the air, everything else around that, the sea. So now there's much greater awareness to build a digital twin of our biology and the world around us. I think to Sophie's point, Arvind's point, this transformation has taken hold. We actually have now greater trust in technology, without which we know we cannot survive.
Interesting. Now,
John, could I maybe just make
of course,
on
of course.
trust?
Yeah.
The reason that people were willing to do it was not just because of efficacy and speed. Of course, that was there. On health data in particular, and many other aspects of personal data, there is also trust that is required that is not going to get misused. So the commitment that many of us make around sovereignty of data, not misusing the data, not associating a particular name with it, is all really important. So from our experiences, whether it's in the UK, with the NHS, whether it's in Germany around vaccine management, whether it's the United States around vaccine work, and I'm sure in Peng's work here, there was an implicit trust. The data will stay within a country, it'll live within the regulations that are different, and those are important because you cannot break that public trust, especially on health data.
Yeah, I know there was a hesitancy, and then people realized the importance of it pretty quickly. The other issue I wanted to bring up for the three of you is cybersecurity. But in the context, I was at the Future Investment Initiative last week, and I was talking about historical disruption, and then I quickly changed that to hysterical disruption. Because if you think about what happened since the global financial crisis, right? And then if you're a BP, you know, they had the Deepwater Horizon, which was complicated. We talked to Bob Dudley this morning. But then, you know, global financial crisis, a pandemic, energy shortage, conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there were other conflicts to deal with. Now we have inflation that we saw when we were children, Arvind, right? We're being generous, but when I was in high school at least. Peng and Sophie weren't alive at that time, but...
I was already in college.
Yeah, you were in college, okay. At least you're honest. I was not. But how do you deal with hysterical disruption and then try to keep your sights on cybersecurity? Because it's, you know, you would say, okay, I can't deal with it now because I've got X, Y, and Z. What are you telling companies?
Look, cybersecurity is going to be the issue of this decade. We already see it. Whether it's attacking physical infrastructure, whether it's attacking energy infrastructure, utilities, banking, etc. Just step back. What if criminals always come after where there is value? If you could take away what's value, then you can get a return for it. There's incredible value in our cyber infrastructure, in the data that's inside the cyber infrastructure, as well as in disrupting it, because it's critical to the operations of us and all of our clients. So it's maybe Sutton's law. I mean, Willie Sutton was a bank robber in the United States, and he was asked once, why do you rob banks? And he kind of looked at the interviewer and said, well, that's where the money is. So why is there cyber criminals? Because that's where the value is. So that's not going to go away. And so in the face of all this, this is essential. Everybody obsesses on national security. We have defense forces. Then you do physical security, right? Police are on buildings. To walk in here, a scanner, a verification of ID. Do we spend anywhere near as much energy as in our resources on cyber? I think it's far more important than the physical security. And so that's what we tell our clients. That's what we do. Cost of breaches is now 4 to 50 to 100 million. Ransomware can shut you down, put you out of operations completely. And so it's important to have layered defenses against all of this. There may not be a silver bullet answer, but you can make it so hard that then they'll attack somebody else, not you. And that is advice that I would give everyone.
Yeah, speaking of critical infrastructure, Adnoc is certainly one of those. Does it keep you up at night, or you feel like you're ahead of the curve, always chasing the curve?
Well, there's always a new disruption, so I think that's the thing to be thinking about, being aware of it, and recognizing that the disruption is happening in the easiest way in. And so quite often, we're the easiest ways in. It's actually up to us. But if we're careless on passwords, we could get bribed potentially. Somebody could be upset having a bad day. They can get bribed. You can get an access key. So there's so many different ways into it, and we need to be aware of this. But I think there's something else we need to bring into this conversation, because we're talking about this from a negative. There's also a lot more public sentiment going on. There's Twitter databases, all sorts of things where all of our businesses are being spoken about. You can see sentiment. All of that data is out there for us to utilize and take in with the technologies that we're working with. So Cerebrum is a new Adnoc platform that we work on, where we're bringing in all sorts of public or subscription databases, but also social media and all sorts of various other public posting forums. We can take all of this in and help with our logistics business, our supply of materials, and understand how the market forces are changing by just simply gobbling up all of this information and predicting with it. And this key of what's happening in society around databases on Twitter and whatnot, this actually gives you an idea when things are starting to shift and turn, and helps you make better business decisions.
Well, it's also, does it help the climate debate? Because I'm active in about, a lot of the renewable space as well, oil and gas, but that white space in between where there could be a meaningful dialogue seems to be missing. Does Cerebrum help identify where that white space could exist? Because the conversation that Dr. Sultan had in the opening ceremony is like, we need to work together. It's not two different camps or multiple different forces.
Absolutely. I think it's Dr. Sultan said, I think if I get this right, maximum energy, minimum emissions. That was his quote. And we need all of it. We need absolutely all of this, because it's no single silver bullet. We'd be talking about something else if this was an easy issue here.
Right.
And our relationship with energy is only growing every day.
Good. Peng, we started in cybersecurity. What are some of the things that you're doing at G42 to fortify the UAE, but to take it to other partners, and I think the collaboration even with IBM in that space?
I think we're working on something incredibly valuable with IBM right now on a global basis. Arvind mentioned earlier, which is this concept of data sovereignty. At the core of that is security. By the way, security should not be an afterthought or even independent thought. It should be integrated into software design from day one, database management from day one. It should be part of our thinking naturally. So sovereign cloud is where a nation has the ability to leverage cloud computing capabilities for its own national benefits without having to be subject to certain data sacrifices by, say, a foreign power or even a foreign company. So what we're doing right now with IBM is to leverage the sovereign cloud infrastructure, the model we built here in the UAE, which has been very successful, used by Adnoc and different government agencies, and take it, fuse it with solutions from IBM, and bring it to other nations to offer them an entire ecosystem. Because data naturally flows into the cloud. Then the cloud will leverage IBM-grade solutions to provide that value back to the end users in a very safe and responsible manner. So this is a key area of collaboration between G42 and IBM Sovereign
Very
Cloud.
interesting. Anything you want to add on that? I'll ask Sophie the same.
It's a great to go back to your very opening comment on sustainability. Actually two of the solutions that we are working on together that ride on top of G42 infrastructure and capabilities is around sustainability.
Yes.
How do you worry about your assets? Can you increase the maintenance lifetime? Can you avoid disruption? All of which, by the way, often cause emission and leakage. And the other one is also back to the data angle, which Sophie has been mentioning, on how can we integrate data in to really get a much better view of scope 1, 2, and 3 consequences. I'll use that word. People say emissions, but I'll say consequences of what you're doing. And Sophie's point about, look, when you look at things end to end, whether on the social media or on data, you can actually make much better decisions if you have a sense of here are my alternates, and these alternates could lead to a reduction in something, but there could be a downstream effect, so you can begin to look at it holistically. These are solutions that we are building. Our expertise is in data and AI, not in oil and gas. But when we work with people like Adnoc and with G42, then we can bring it together with the domain experts across all of us to get the win that the planet needs from us.
Well, Sophie, you wanted to address sharing and shielding, or sharing and not shielding, when it applies to the oil and gas sector. And then I see the dialogue amongst the IECs, International Energy Companies, and the NOCs, or NECs, as an Adnoc is now, National Energy Company, as well. You have that issue of can't have a cartel, but that shouldn't come into the space of data sharing. How do you define the right pathway for collaboration amongst energy companies, would you suggest?
Well, I think we're stronger together, and we need to recognize that. We've all sort of touched on this. We have different expertise sitting here and different insights, and we also work with different partners. So the first thing is, how do we make sure that the data that needs to stay secure does stay secure? And that's where Peng talks about sovereign cloud, making sure that the data that needs to be residing in country stays in country. But the cloud is something that we can access, and if there's mutual benefit for both of us, we can actually find accelerated solutions given our different experiences. As an oil and gas operator, Adnoc has lots of experience around areas that perhaps IBM and G42 don't have expertise, but they have insights into completely different areas where when we collaborate, we build better, more robust solutions, and we get to the answer faster. I think this is the really important part as we think about the energy transition and the journey. We don't have the time that we had to build the existing energy infrastructure all over again for new green energy. So how do we do it faster? Well, we collaborate. We also come to trade shows like this, and we see what other people are doing. We don't get threatened by it. We have a conversation. We say, how did you do that? That's quite interesting. We make connections to each other.
This is an interesting point, because one of the things I was suggesting in my other panels today and the day before is that that white space that's there is not a collaborative discussion right now when it comes to climate. And I was even saying the language that we see within the COP community, if you don't understand energy, it's like Swahili, right? And I'm sure you have a translation device for Swahili, but we can't all have it at our fingertips. So where does technology fit in here to get better progress in the collaboration you're talking about, but even as a bridge between the energy companies and the climate community and lenders? But it seems like we're very disparate camps, and it's not solving the problem. Arvind, I see you nodding. You must agree with that.
I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. I do believe in there's human
God bless
ingenuity,
you, we need more of that,
and there is that. I'll take some really narrow examples, because you should also begin always from yourself. What can we do?
Right.
As a large technology company, we are a reasonably large user of energy. And I'll take an example. Also, we got lucky. We got started on this last year, and this is in the United Kingdom. We have a large data center. As you can imagine, it consumes a certain amount of electricity from the earth. We got together with a local energy company, in this case Shell, and we said, what could we do to prove to ourselves on how much can you get done? So we said, first, do all the servers need to be on all the time? What can we do leveraging AI to know which servers can be used when? That is where my 30% number comes from, because that's been proven out now again and again in multiple data centers. Two, how much could we begin to do by leveraging renewables, whether on the roof and geothermal, because data centers need cooling, which people forget. It's not just to run the computers. The cooling takes as much energy, by the way, as running the computers, unless you run them in Iceland.
Right.
So we said, using all that, provably about 30% less. You put that together and we
in a
said,
span of a year.
in the span of a year. So we have actually achieved a total of 70% reduction in energy off the grid, which is cost, in doing that. What was the capex? Geothermal and a bit of solar. Now, that makes me optimistic. Now, that needed us. It needed our software capability. It needed some cooperation from the people who do the HVAC equipment and all the servers, which are not ours. It needed Shell to cooperate. Now that we have this, it's a pattern. Now, how far out can we go? By the way, it's not unique to what we can do. I think we can do it with many others. Part of the work that Adnoc and us are doing is also on looking at sustainability around the Adnoc environment. We're not saying we understand energy in that case, but we do understand in that case one usage of it, which is in computers, but there are many, many other usages that we are never going to understand. And can we bring this aspect of bringing data, because technology in this case is bringing the data in and getting those advantages. I think it is exactly, you're calling it the white space, I call it in that collaboration space.
Yes.
Because if we had set our researchers off on their own, I think here what took 1 year would have taken 5. Back to Sophie's point of speed is of the essence here.
Good. Peng?
I would love to add to this point. I share your perspective, by the way, Arvind. A great example right here at home in Abu Dhabi is what we did with Adnoc, G40 to Adnoc. We created a company called AIQ. And this is joint venture focused on applying AI technology to oil and gas industry. Small example, AIQ right now is working on a program. The product is almost mature to be able to support the drilling business going through the data from a borehole, which can go underground 1 to 5 kilometers. As Arvind mentioned earlier, right? We have great geologists, scientists in the industry who have human knowledge, who may spend 6 months understanding the data and tell us what to do with the experiment we did on the ground. But using AI technology now, we can do it within hours.
Wow.
That's incredible efficiency generated.
Does it take the risk out too, I'd imagine? Peng? It takes a lot more of the risk out.
It takes a lot of human hours out of it, and the machines don't get tired. They make less mistakes. So I think this is happening right now, this collaboration. I love what you said, Arvind. This white space is a great space for collaboration, for partnership. If companies, people, and governments are willing to come together to bring the best out of each other.
Good. Honestly, do you feel a little bit frustrated because we talk about the institutions created after World War II, the Bretton Woods institutions, and about modernizing for the 21st century. For people that move at hyperspeed, and then you look at the inability of governments and IGOs to step up to the task. Do you want to share your thoughts? I think we could be much more efficient.
Much more.
Even recognizing Africa would not use the same energy system that we would use in Europe. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
I'll say something might be a bit radical. I think the tech community is not even waiting for governments at all. Look at Web 3.0. It's about decentralized web. Blockchain is about having trust everywhere without a central authority. Crypto is happening like it or not.
Yeah.
Our friend CZ from Binance has made Dubai his home. I'm sure you know
Yes,
Binance.
of course. Yeah.
You like Binance or not, last year, over $30 trillion changed hands, trillion, on the Binance network.
Wow.
These are people doing business with each other with no government central control. So 3.0 of the web is here right now. Governments need to ask themselves, what do I do about it? Blocking it, kicking it out, bury your head in the sand is not a solution.
So if you want to jump in on this?
Well, I think it's interesting because you actually get to leapfrog technology.
You're right.
It's stepping back thinking, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? And allowing yourself with all the tools you have today, don't improve or optimize the solution, just leapfrog and create a completely new solution. It's possible.
That takes quite a leap, doesn't it, or not?
Look, I think the role of government should not be to try to interfere in technology. I mean, I don't think there's been very many successful examples outside the military complex on that. The role of government is, though, there to provide guardrails. Make sure that these damages don't happen. Make sure that there is a legal framework in case damage gets done. So the role of government should always be, and then how do you create innovation inside that? Peng used the internet example. Yes, the internet was actually funded initially by the US government, called ARPANET, started off in the late 70s. Great movement that got forward. Do you know that regardless of all that, they put no controls on it and how the first 10 years it evolved? If they had, the speed would have been half or 1/3. So the role of government should be, how do you create innovation? How do you foment innovation? Let's make sure you put guardrails. Is it important to make sure if you create a drug, you don't just try it on people without safety? Back to Peng's 3-month example. So the rule should be there. I am 100% sure that Sophie would react pretty badly if the government tried to say, don't drill that way, only drill with that bit, or only drill in that angle. I mean, that doesn't work. They're not the experts on those topics. But maybe where you're allowed to drill is a reasonable role for them to play.
Okay, I'd like to know where your limits are, and then I'll move on to the audience, and you can all three weigh in on this. But you know, one would say that what we have in Silicon Valley are like the oligarchs of technology. They made a spree of acquisitions, buying up 100 to 200 companies each, right? And with a lot of control over data. Is that a good thing, Arvind, from your standpoint? Or does it need to be broken up or monitored more closely?
So you had 3 questions in there. It's not a good thing. Whenever somebody gets too much control over any asset, it has been proven again and again and again that then you get too much innovation slows down, the benefit to people slows down, the benefit to society slows down. I'll go back to my original statement. The reason we talk about energy is because energy and quality of life are connected.
Yes.
And GDP is a proxy for quality of life, right? It's not a perfect proxy, but it's a good enough proxy. So you've got to be able to drive it forward that many can benefit, not just one. That is where I think that too much control in one entity is not a good thing. Yep. Now, what is the remedy for that? I think there's lots of different remedies. Remedies can be behavioral, remedies can be, breaking up is a very strong. I don't think actually breaking up has ever proven to be successful going back in the past.
No.
But there are other ways to go manage the behavior.
Good. Let me get your Abu Dhabi perspective, Peng, from G42. You know, the conflict between China and the United States now, and different technologies and spyware, and what are the motivations of data. How do we manage this where there's trust in this audience, for example? So if you brought up the trust even within companies to collaborate with each other, how do you see it with the big titans of the 2 biggest economies even not seeing it eye to eye?
I think it'll get worse before it gets better globally. But that's also the beauty of UAE, beauty of Abu Dhabi. We are the digital Switzerland. We are in the land of neutrality. We work with IBM. We work with Sinopharm. Whoever is a willing and a capable partner who are transparent, share our common interests and value, we'll work with them. So we built a national platform that is embracive, inclusive. To your point, we promote partnerships often, right? So unfortunately, for reasons beyond my own comprehension, the great powers and superpowers are not locking horns with each other. In part, I believe it's because they are concerned about who will have the technology dominance one day and control the whole world. But I think when you look at the global situation as a whole, countries who maintain neutrality, who are open to doing business with everyone, ultimately will succeed.
That's very true. And in fact, when there was the anti-globalization movement on different waves, the Minister of Economy in Dubai for the UAE government said, we're a globalized economy, we would die without globalization, right? So the more we can collaborate, the better. But the Singapores of the world, or Hong Kong, or UAE, right? The DNA is to trade and be open.
We respect the concern of security issues and so on and so forth. That's why we promote the concept of sovereign cloud, right? We don't say cloud is no good because somehow your data sits somewhere else. But we promote the idea of being able to get the best of both worlds. Sovereign cloud is where you can have the technology of cloud that benefit but maintain data sovereignty.
Very good. Yeah. Excellent. What a fantastic conversation. Let's open up the floor to questions. So do we have any questions from the floor? And do we have the microphones within sight so I can see them too? Any questions? I'll give it another 15 seconds.
While defining a question, you asked Peng about globalization.
Well, I love a co-moderator.
David Ricardo.
I have one for you, but go ahead.
So David Ricardo said a long time ago, a competitive advantage of nations is how you grow global GDP. And we shouldn't forget that if we don't have global trade and globalization, everybody's going to suffer.
But we should do it in a much more prudent way when you look at the trilemma, right? I think the problem is some people pursue growth without the multiple objectives. I think that's a fair point.
You need some frameworks. I go back to, you need some guardrails. and it only works when both sides can benefit, not when only one side benefits.
Great. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and it's great that we have a female leader in the technology space as well, is the supply chain. And we often don't look at the supply chain when it comes to talent, right? So I'd love to find out, how do you embrace Gen X and Gen Z, and how do we embrace to create the multiple Sophies in the world that want to come into technology? Do you want to start, Sophie? Do you feel like you're a torchbearer? Or?
No, I want to start because this is actually something I'm passionate about. So I think intellectual curiosity around technology is developed when you're quite young. Huh. So when I think back to my childhood, I was pulling things apart like lawnmowers that I remember my parents were not very happy about, but I was pulling things apart trying to understand them. And I think we need to recognize that intellectual curiosity that kids have actually starts quite early. So we need to recognize it, we need to nurture it. And I believe tech and engineering and science and mathematics, these are places where there's actually a home for everyone, because we all think in different ways. And that's the beauty when you start getting into the tech community and the scientific community.
It's the real universal language.
Yes, it truly is. And it's about asking questions and questioning why and saying, how do we do this better? And trying to find a way where we can break down the way it's been done. But then we get into the kind of the formal education system. Formal education system, we need to recognize now that the people who are coming out of universities are going to be in a different world than all of us have been living in. So you go to high school, you get your degree, the next 30, 50 years of the working environment are going to be very, very different. How you relate with AI, how you relate with technology, these are going to be integral to how businesses are run and how we live in this totally integrated world that is where we are today. So I think we need to be recognizing that our education systems need to be evolving. Our education systems need to be skilling people with the tools that they are adaptable. They recognize they may have multiple careers and job changes throughout their working lives, and they also have the ability to connect now. So think about back to the pandemic. We've been able to connect. We immediately found a way to continue moving forward. That's actually going to be very important for the next 30, 50 years of working. It's completely different than any education that we had.
100%. It's interesting at NYU. It's funny, if you put up an idea that is out of the box, they actually challenge you to bring it to the table, because they have to think differently than they would have 10 years ago, to Sophie's point. I would imagine, are you still headquartered in White Plains, is that correct?
Just now the White Plains.
Just outside, and then I'd love to get Peng's view on this as our final thoughts. I know you're extremely active in trying to push the change in education, and it's not easy because there's kind of entrenched interests. This is the way we've done it. Are we bringing technology into the classroom at a faster pace?
So
right?
first, I want to just echo all of Sophie's comments on this topic. Then that said, we have things we haven't yet come to the bottom of. Why is there a gender gap in the STEM subjects, at least in US colleges? It's massive, by the way. We're talking low 20% compared to 70% for men. What will be needed to solve that gap? I speculate there is data that supports it, that this begins really in the last few years of high school. It doesn't really begin in college. It gets further progress in college. So I think that the remedy lies in going back to high school, to those last 4 years, because I look at where even my own children went. Till grade 8 or 9, I didn't really see a big difference. After grade 9, every year the gap grew. And so I think that those last 3-4 years of high school, and I think it's not as simple as just a way of teaching. I think it's everything. Societal pressure, expectations, who else is there, role models, maybe the way of teaching. And I think that that's really important. Now, what can we do? We can lean in. We can lean in by really offering really good careers to women. We can lean in terms of pushing and trying to say, look, we're going to recruit more from these places. We can go forward. You said, Sophie, but Can we have thousands of role models like Sophie for people to look at and go? And we encourage the women inside IBM to really go out and be role models, to go out. And I was really pleased. Grace Hopper is a conference in technology, I'll admit, not in oil and gas, but in technology. And you get about between anywhere from 20 to 30,000 women who come there. And I get excited when the lines around our booths get long, so that those people are looking at, okay, can I make a career? Because I see people like myself at your company. But there should be hundreds of companies like that.
Yeah, no kidding. And G42, I know there's a great movement, as you said, in the collaboration between Dubai and Abu Dhabi especially, but linking in with the other 5 Emirates, of getting the talent that you need here, right? And the visa policy to be able to do so. What sort of influence you trying to have in influencing the future workforce of the UAE, both homegrown and talent that can come in?
We actually, John, great question. Thank you for this. Just launched a brand new initiative with our friends in Israel. We launched a new program called the Global Valley. This is between UAE, sponsored by the government, spearheaded by G40's commercial company, and our counterpart, a fund in Israel called the Viola Fund. Global Valley is a concept where we want to attract top talents to come to this region and give them ready jobs to work on. So for example, due to the war in Ukraine, the Israelis lost many talents in Ukraine and no longer have access to them. Over 50,000 of them disappeared, right? They went to war. So they are struggling now to find new talent. And guess what? A lot of people love to move here and live and work in the UAE. So this agreement, phase 1, is for us to work together and bring 10,000 engineers from around the world, Eastern Europe, China, India, US, anywhere, to come here in the same time zone, on the same sovereign cloud infrastructure, and support our friends in Israel, because they have jobs to be filled, and we can provide that ecosystem. So Global Valley is a great example of what we're doing today in that area. If I can go back just briefly to the point you mentioned earlier about people like Sophie and great leaders in this industry, I must agree with you, Sophie, that I think curiosity is the key for developing talent. And you start, Arvind, I'm sorry to disagree with you a little bit, way before high school. Way before, I think.
Well, if Sophie was breaking down lawnmowers in her house, I think it's probably
early childhood.
Yeah.
I recently had a conversation, very fortunate to speak with Sheikha Marian about this topic. She has an early childhood foundation, as you probably know.
That's right.
So the idea is to go back to the early stages, very early on, to develop a healthy lifestyle and curiosity for learning. And I believe education system eventually will have no longer any physical walls or borders. We'll learn, I hope, through games. Because games will keep all the children engaged and curious and excited. You can learn math, language, you can learn computing, all through gaming. So this is another thing we're promoting right now in the UAE, to build a gamified education platform, to engage everyone. They can be learning at night without going to the classroom.
Right. You think the classroom in 20 years would be as
I
different
think
as it
it'll
should
be
be?
obsolete. I think it'll be obsolete. I think it's similar to hospitals. We're hoping in the future you go there if something is really terribly wrong.
Yeah.
You go to school for something highly specialized. Otherwise, you are learning at home, in your bedroom, in your living room, playing games.
Right. That's very, very good. We didn't have any questions from the floor. I think it's because this panel's so bright that nobody wanted to venture into your white space, if you will. But can we give a nice round of applause to all 3 of them? Excellent.